Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It was supposed to be a quiet night. A woman named Rachel, living alone in her small apartment, had gotten used to the silence after moving out of her parents' house for the first time. She kept her routine simple: lock the doors, check the windows twice, and leave a small lamp on in the living room so the dark never felt overwhelming. That night, though, something felt different the moment she got home from work. She noticed the blinds in her bedroom slightly parted, even though she always left them shut. She chalked it up to forgetting, convincing herself she was just tired. Around 1 a.m., she woke up to the sound of something shifting in the kitchen. At first it was faint, like a chair leg scraping against tile. She held her breath, listening, waiting for it to happen again. When silence followed, she told herself it must have been the neighbors above her. But then she heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossing her living room floor. Her chest tightened. She reached for her phone, but it wasn't on the nightstand where she always kept it. She had left it charging in the kitchen. That realization alone made her stomach turn. Every muscle in her body locked as she tried to decide whether to bolt for the door or stay hidden under the covers. She remembered the blinds again, the ones she swore she never opened. The footsteps grew closer, stopping just outside her bedroom door. She could hear breathing, low and steady, on the other side. The knob rattled gently as though someone was testing it. She hadn't locked her bedroom door. Why would she? She froze, praying the person would leave. But then the knob turned slowly, and the door creaked open an inch at a time. The light from the living room lamp spilled into her room, and in the crack of the door she saw an outline. A man, tall, standing completely still. He didn't move, didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching. She shut her eyes tight, pretending to sleep, though her heart hammered so hard she thought it would give her away. After what felt like an eternity, the man turned and walked back toward the living room. She heard the faint sound of her phone being unplugged, and then silence again. Rachel stayed frozen until the sun came up. When she finally worked up the courage to leave her room, she found the living room empty, the front door still locked from the inside, and her phone gone. On the kitchen counter was a single item that wasn't hers, an old scratched key with a piece of tape wrapped around it, and on the tape, written in shaky black marker, was a single word: soon. That night she left and never returned to that apartment, because no matter how much she replayed it in her head, she could never explain how he got in, or worse, why he wanted her to know he'd be back.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 2.
A man named Alex lived in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building in his city. He worked late nights and was used to walking home through the dimly lit streets, never really thinking much of it. One Friday night, he came home around midnight, exhausted, and dropped his bag near the door. He liked the silence of his apartment, the faint hum of the fridge, and the way the old pipes creaked occasionally. But that night, something felt heavier, different. After changing into sweatpants, he sat down to watch a show. But no matter how loud he turned the volume, he kept hearing faint sounds behind him, like soft footsteps. At first, he thought it was just his neighbors, since the walls were thin. But then he realized the footsteps were coming from inside his own apartment. He muted the TV. Silence. Then he heard it again. A slow creak on the wooden floorboards behind his bedroom door. His stomach tightened. The door was shut, and he knew he hadn't gone in there since he got home. He tried to convince himself maybe he left the window open and the wind had moved something. Summoning courage, he walked over, turned the knob, and pushed the door open. The room was dark. He flipped the light on. Everything looked normal. He checked the window. It was locked. Relieved, he started to laugh at himself until he noticed something chilling. On the edge of his bed, the blanket was slightly pulled down, as if someone had just gotten up. He was certain he had made the bed that morning. His throat went dry. He quickly searched the closet and under the bed. Nothing. Trying to calm down, he shut the door again and returned to the couch. That's when his phone buzzed on the table. He grabbed it and froze. There was a text message from an unknown number. "Why did you close the door?" His heart nearly stopped. He stared at the screen, his fingers shaking. He immediately dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher that someone was in his apartment. The operator told him to stay on the line and stay quiet. As he crouched behind the couch, he heard it again, footsteps. This time, heavier, slow, deliberate. The creak of the bedroom door opening. He held his breath, clutching the phone. The dispatcher asked quietly if he was safe. He couldn't answer. He watched in the dim light as a shadow stretched across the wall, moving toward the living room. By the time the police arrived, they found the apartment empty. No intruder, no signs of forced entry. The only strange thing was Alex's phone, which had been placed neatly on the kitchen counter, screen still lit with that same text. The officers left after a thorough check, telling him it must have been a prank or his imagination. But when Alex finally worked up the courage to go into his bedroom again, he noticed something new carved faintly into the wall above his bed. "I like watching you sleep." He never stayed another night in that apartment.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 3.
A few years ago, a college student named Eric stayed behind in his off-campus apartment while his roommates went away for the weekend. He figured a quiet night alone would give him time to catch up on work and finally relax. The complex was in a safe enough neighborhood, and Eric didn't think much of being by himself. That night, he was watching a late movie when he started hearing faint noises in the hallway outside his door. At first, he assumed it was just another tenant coming home late. But when the sounds didn't stop, slow dragging footsteps, then silence, then a faint tapping on the wall, he muted the TV and held his breath. After a few minutes, everything went quiet again. Eric shook it off, telling himself he was just being paranoid. He decided to head to bed around 2 a.m., but as he was brushing his teeth, he heard something that made his stomach drop. The sound of his doorknob turning. Slowly. Metal clicking against metal, like someone trying to test if it was locked. He froze in place, foam in his mouth, staring at the front door from the bathroom mirror's angle. The knob jiggled once more and then stopped. Eric quietly crept to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and waited. He didn't call the police. He thought maybe it was just a drunk neighbor who got the wrong door. Minutes turned to an hour, and nothing happened. Finally, exhausted but still uneasy, he locked his bedroom door and laid in bed, clutching the knife to his chest. At around 4 a.m., he woke up to the sound of his closet door creaking open. His bedroom window was locked, his door still shut. He sat up slowly, his pulse hammering in his ears, and whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. He got up, flicked on the light, and forced himself to open the closet. Nothing. Just his clothes and shoes. But when he turned back toward his bed, his stomach twisted. On the sheets was a damp, muddy footprint, too large to be his, pointing toward where he had been lying just minutes before. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night, sitting against the wall with every light in the apartment on. The next morning, when his roommates came back, they found him pale and shaking, still holding the knife. The footprint was gone by then, as if it had never existed. Eric moved out a few weeks later and swore he'd never stay alone in that apartment again. The thing that haunted him most wasn't the noises or even the doorknob turning. It was the thought that while he was lying there in the dark, clutching his knife, someone had already been inside his room, close enough to leave that footprint at the edge of his bed.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 4.
It was just past midnight when Evan finally turned off the TV and realized the silence in his apartment felt heavier than usual. He lived alone in a quiet building, the kind of place where the creak of a floorboard or the hum of a refrigerator could seem deafening if you paid too much attention. That night, though, something felt wrong the moment he shut off the lights in the living room. He had the strange sense that someone else was inside with him. He brushed it off as exhaustion and went to his bedroom. Just as he was about to close the door, he froze. The faintest sound of a shuffle echoed from the kitchen, not like the settling of an old building, but deliberate, slow movement. He told himself it was probably the neighbors, maybe noise carrying through the vents. He shut the door anyway, locked it, and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come. At around 2 a.m., he heard it again, this time closer. A dragging sound followed by a soft thump. He sat up in bed, holding his breath, staring at the gap under his door. That was when he saw it, a faint shadow moving past the door, stopping for a moment, then continuing down the hallway. His phone was on the nightstand, and he grabbed it immediately, dialing 911. But the line didn't connect. His phone, which had been fully charged, was suddenly dead. The only light in the room came from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. Evan reached into his nightstand drawer and pulled out a small flashlight. He held it tightly, debating whether to stay hidden or confront whoever or whatever was inside. Gathering every bit of courage, he opened the door slowly, the hinges groaning louder than they ever had. The hallway was empty. He swept the beam of his flashlight across the floor. Nothing. But when he turned toward the kitchen, his heart dropped. The refrigerator door was wide open, the contents spilled across the floor. Milk, eggs, and containers scattered everywhere, but no sign of anyone. He inched closer, scanning every corner, every shadow. Then, from behind the counter, he heard a low, ragged breathing. Evan froze. He raised the flashlight and caught the briefest glimpse of someone crouched down, their face hidden, shoulders heaving as if they were struggling to breathe. His body screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. Then, in a sudden burst, the figure bolted up, knocking the flashlight out of his hand. The light spun across the floor, landing just in time to show pale, dirty feet sprinting down the hallway toward his bedroom. He realized too late that he had left the window in his bedroom unlocked earlier in the evening. By the time he stumbled back in, flashlight trembling in his grip, the window was wide open, curtains blowing in the night air. Whoever it was had escaped, but not before leaving something behind. On his pillow, there was a small, folded note. His hands shook as he opened it. In scrawled handwriting, it read, "I like watching you sleep." Evan moved out of that apartment 2 weeks later, but he never found out who had been inside that night. The police said there were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing to trace. The only thing they found was the faint mark of dirty, bare feet on his hardwood floor, leading directly to where his bed had been.
Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 5.
A man named Anthony lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. He worked late shifts and was used to coming home when the streets were quiet, the world still, and most of his neighbors already asleep. He never thought of himself as someone who scared easily, but there was one night that he never forgot. A night that left him questioning if he'd ever truly been alone in that apartment. It was close to 2 a.m. when he came home from work. He dropped his keys on the counter, heated up some leftovers, and sat down in front of the TV. The air felt unusually heavy, like the walls themselves were pressing closer. Anthony tried to brush it off as exhaustion. After eating, he left the plate in the sink and went to take a shower. When he stepped out, the mirror was fogged, but he could see something strange in the condensation. A smudged fingerprint trail across the glass, as if someone had touched it before him. He froze, remembering that he hadn't cleaned it in days, and when he left for work that afternoon, it had been clear. He wiped it with his towel, told himself maybe it had been him, and went to bed. Lying in the dark, Anthony heard the faintest creak of a floorboard in the living room. He sat up, straining to hear, but the apartment was silent again. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling. He grabbed a flashlight and slowly made his way out of the bedroom. The beam cut through the shadows, sweeping across the empty kitchen and the living room. Everything looked normal. But when he turned toward the window, he noticed the curtain had been pulled back slightly. He never left it like that. He tugged it closed and went back to bed, telling himself it was nothing. He had just started drifting off when he heard it. 3 slow knocks, not on the door, but inside the apartment, somewhere near the hallway wall. His chest tightened. He didn't move, didn't breathe. After what felt like forever, he forced himself to get up, turn on every light in the apartment, and check every corner. There was no one there. Trying to calm himself, Anthony sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. That's when his stomach dropped. In the reflection of the black TV screen, he thought he saw someone standing in the hallway behind him. He whipped around, heart pounding, but again, the hallway was empty. The silence in the room seemed to mock him. He couldn't take it anymore. He decided he would stay awake until the sun came up. Around 4:30 a.m., he heard the sound of the bathroom door creaking open. It had been shut tight after his shower. He didn't move, didn't dare go look. He just sat frozen on the couch until daylight finally spilled through the blinds. When the morning came, Anthony finally went to the bathroom. On the fogged mirror, written faintly with a fingertip, were words that hadn't been there the night before. Nice place. He moved out of the apartment a week later and never stayed alone at night again.